There's a dandelion coming up through the gravel by my back gate, and a scoop of white powder that costs about $1 will have it brown and crisp by tomorrow afternoon. It works, and it keeps working, and nothing grows in that spot for a long time afterward. But that last part is exactly why I'll never let it near a tomato bed, and it's most of the reason nobody sells it in a bag labeled weed killer. Today, I'll show you what it is, what the law actually says, and what to use instead. It's salt. Plain sodium chloride, the same blue canister of table salt sitting in your kitchen cabinet, or the bag of rock salt left over in the garage from last winter. That's the entire product, and that's the dollar. And it does work, which is where people go wrong when they call it a myth. The King County Noxious Weed Program out in Washington explains the mechanism in about one sentence. Salt kills by pulling water back out of plant tissue. Put enough of it around the crown of a dandelion, let a rain water it in, and the concentration in the soil outside those roots ends up higher than the concentration inside them. So the water runs backward, it leaves the plant instead of entering it. The leaves go limp, then they brown at the edges, then the whole dandelion turns crisp and papery, usually inside a day or two of hot weather. Nobody discovered this last year either. The old story about Rome salting the fields of Carthage is almost certainly something a historian invented centuries later, but the reason it spread is that the effect it describes is real, and it doesn't wear off in a hurry. And that part, the not wearing off, is the part everybody treats as the selling point. On my gravel path, honestly, it is the selling point. 6 feet away in a raised bed of tomatoes, that exact same quality is what cost you 2 growing seasons, and I'll walk you through precisely how. First, that number keeps repeating. You'll hear that this stuff is banned in 23 states. I went looking for the list because I couldn't find one person who could tell me which 23. There isn't a list. There also isn't anybody hiding it, which I'll admit is the less exciting answer. Here's what's actually on the books. The Environmental Protection Agency keeps a short roster of ingredients it treats as minimum risk under Section 25B of the Federal Pesticide Law. Sodium chloride is on that roster. Common table salt, it's exempt from federal pesticide registration, and it has been for decades. But exempt from federal registration is not the same as free to sell. The Association of American Pesticide Control Officials spells this out in its guidance for those products. States are under no obligation to allow the sale of something just because the federal government exempted it. Most states make a company register the product with the State Department of Agriculture first. Montana wants a label, a safety data sheet, and a confidential statement of what's in the box. Among the New England states, Connecticut, Maine, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont all require registration. Massachusetts doesn't. New York currently doesn't either. So the reason you can't walk into a garden center and buy a $1 sack of salt with the words weed killer printed on the front isn't that somebody buried it. It's 50 separate registration desks, an annual fee at most of them, and a product nobody can make a nickel on. That's not a cover-up. That's a filing cabinet. Nobody can make money selling you salt, and the good, cheap answers in gardening rarely arrive in a bag. Everything I run in my own beds is written down day by day in Steve's 30-day maximum yield protocol. 115 pages laid out as a 30-day order of operations from soil preparation to harvest. It covers the big 7 yield killers, feeding for fruit instead of foliage, the pruning that feels wrong the first time you try it, and companion and succession planning. It's for the grower who wants a lot more food out of the ground they already have without adding a square foot. It'll save you the seasons of guessing, and the wheelbarrow of replacement soil a shortcut like this one costs. Now go ahead and grab your phone and open up your camera, the same one you use to take pictures. Point it at that square code on your screen and hold it steady for a second. A little link will pop up, give it a tap, and it will take you straight to the book. And if you are watching on your phone right now, the link is waiting for you right down below in the description. Take your time, there is no rush at all. I'll wait right here. So, the salt kills the weed, it's legal, and it costs $1. Now let me show you what it does to the ground underneath that weed, because that's the part that turns a good deal into a bad trade. Salt does not break down. I don't mean that as a figure of speech. Sodium is an element. A synthetic herbicide has a half-life. It degrades, soil microbes chew on it, and in a few weeks or a few months there's measurably less of it than there was. Sodium has no half-life. It doesn't rot, It doesn't evaporate, and nothing in your soil eats it. The only thing that ever happens to sodium is that it moves, and it moves the way water moves. Rain hits your gravel path, runs off the low side, and carries dissolved salt into whatever sits downhill of it. A single downspout can push a few hundred gallons through the same corner of a yard in one storm. Over a summer, salt you deliberately put on a path can end up in a bed you never touched. The University of Wisconsin-Madison Extension Office in Dane County put a number on how little it takes to cause trouble. 1 teaspoon of salt in a 5-gallon bucket of water. A teaspoon in 5 gallons. Now picture what a handful looks like next to that. They also track where it finally ends up, and a lot of it ends up in drinking water wells because sodium leaving your soil doesn't stop at the property line. Now here's the part that hits your harvest directly. And it's why a salted bed doesn't only look rough, it produces less. Michigan State University Extension has a write-up on salt damage in home landscapes. And the finding in it that matters most to somebody growing food is this. Sodium ions cut down how much potassium, calcium, and magnesium a root can take up. Go back over those three because they're not a random list. Potassium is what fills a fruit out and puts sugar in it. Calcium is what builds the cell walls at the blossom end of a tomato, and when a plant can't move calcium into a fruit fast enough, you get blossom end rot, which is that sunken black patch on the bottom of an otherwise fine tomato. Magnesium sits at the center of every chlorophyll molecule in every leaf on the plant, which is another way of saying it's what makes a leaf green enough to feed anything at all. So sodium never has to kill your tomato plant to cost you money. It only has to sit between the root and those three. What you get is a plant that looks alive, sets maybe half the fruit it should, and rots a good share of what it does set. And you would never in 100 years connect that to the driveway. Then there's the dirt itself. Sodium changes the way clay behaves. The Dane County write-up describes the result plainly enough. Excess sodium in soil leads to reduced water infiltration and to compaction. The clay particles quit clumping together and start dispersing. The surface crusts over hard and rain sheets off the top instead of soaking down to where the roots are. So the bed starves and dries out at the same time in a year when it rained plenty. Now, I'm not going to tell you to pour the salt out because there's one job it does better than anything else. $1 buys gravel driveways, the cracks between concrete slabs that strip along a chain link fence where nothing is ever going to grow anyway. In places like those, permanent is exactly the result you want. And salt delivers it cheaper than any product on the shelf. I hold myself to 4 rules when I use it, and all 4 come from that same fact, that it travels. Put it down dry, right on the crown of the weed, a spoonful at a time. Don't broadcast it, and don't spray a solution around because every bit that misses is on its way somewhere. Never use it uphill from a garden bed. Water runs down. That's the entire rule. Never use it in the path of a downspout or a driveway drain, and never anywhere near a wellhead. And keep it well outside the drip line of any tree you're fond of because tree roots run out a good deal farther than the branches do. Follow those 4 and salt is a fine path tool. Break one of them and you've bought yourself a repair job that takes years. Now, if you've been around gardeners for a while, somebody has told you about the other cheap powder. This one has a university behind it, and the story is genuinely a good one. In 1986, Nick Christians was running a turfgrass disease study at Iowa State University and using corn gluten meal as a growing medium. Corn gluten meal is a byproduct of corn milling, sold mostly as livestock feed. The grass seed in his plots didn't come up the way it should have, and instead of writing that off as a bad batch, he chased it. What Christians found was that certain protein compounds in corn gluten stop a germinating seed from forming roots. The seed sprouts, it pushes up a little leaf. It never builds a root system, and the first dry stretch finishes it. He was granted a patent on it as a natural pre-emergent in 1991. That should have been the end of the weed problem for every organic gardener in the country. Then Oregon State University ran it through their own trials, and it wasn't close. They found no evidence of weed control in any trial they ran, before emergence or after. And because corn gluten meal is roughly 10% nitrogen by weight, what it actually did was feed. Their nursery crop specialist, James Altland, reported thick, lush growth in the shrub beds of the weeds. Washington State University's extension writes up lands in the same place a little more gently. Strong results in a greenhouse, inconsistent results in an actual yard. So that's your dollar aisle. One powder sterilizes the ground for years. The other one turns out to be a decent nitrogen fertilizer with a patent on it. Neither one is the answer, and they both miss for the same reason. And that reason is the thing I actually want you to walk away with today. Weeds don't cost you a harvest by existing. They cost you a harvest by existing at a particular time. There's a measured thing in agronomy called the critical period of weed control. It's the stretch of the season when a crop has to be kept clean or the yield drops. And outside of that stretch, weeds mostly don't take anything from you. South Dakota State University Extension lays out the standard picture using a 5% yield loss as the line nobody wants to cross. And for a lot of crops, the window falls roughly 3 to 6 weeks after the crop comes up. 3 to 6 weeks, not the whole summer, about a month. Weeds that sprout before that window get turned under at planting. Weeds that sprout after it, once the crop's leaves have closed over the row, are sitting in shade and costing you close to nothing. The ones that take real pounds off your total are the ones growing shoulder to shoulder with a young plant during that 1 month while the crop is still small and the sun is still hitting bare dirt. The University of Massachusetts Vegetable Program frames this as a question, and it's the most useful way I've heard it put. The question isn't, when do I start weeding? The question is, when am I allowed to stop? For what it's worth, this is measured money at full scale too. Clemson University's vegetable weed science people put crop losses to weeds in this country somewhere around $32 billion a year. Nobody is fixing that with a canister of salt. So here's what that 1 month actually looks like in bed. You hoe shallow and you hoe early. Iowa State's crop specialists put a number to this that stuck with me. A 10-inch weed is far more likely to cost you yield than a 4-inch weed, which means you're not out there pulling plants, you're skimming threads. A sharp hoe, an inch under the surface on a dry morning, so what you cut dries in the sun instead of rerooting in mud. You stop digging deep in there. Every deep pass turns up a fresh layer of buried seed and hands it the light it's been waiting years for. Staying shallow keeps that seed bank asleep. You mulch once the soil has warmed up, not before. About 3 inches of straw or shredded leaves pulled back a couple of inches off the stem so nothing sits wet against them. And you plant so the canopy closes. Spacing where the leaves touch by midsummer means the bed shades itself and does your weeding for free from that point on. That's also why carrots and onions are the hardest beds you will ever keep clean. They never build a canopy, so their window runs long and you're on your knees in there for weeks. Squash and bush beans shut the door early and largely handle themselves once they do. So that dandelion by my back gate is still getting the salt because gravel isn't growing me anything. The bed 6 feet away gets a sharp hoe and 3 inches of straw for 4 weeks in June. Both of those cost about $1. Only one of them is still working for me 5 years from now. That 4-week window is 1 page out of a 30-day sequence, and the whole thing is laid out in Steve's 30-day maximum yield protocol. From soil preparation in the spring right through to the last picking in the fall. Now go ahead and grab your phone and open up your camera and point it at that square code on your screen and hold it steady for a second. A little link will pop up, give it a tap, and it will take you straight to the book. And if you're watching on your phone right now, the link is waiting for you right down below in the description. Now, if you enjoyed this video, you will enjoy the video right now on screen even more. I can assure you on that. Click it right now, my friend.